importance of elected members listening to community feedback. Ellie, you've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, great. Hey, there's a way you could actually help some of your incomers, put those guys on the road. If you did a tour with them, the choir, they're phenomenal. That gave me goosebumps coming
They're
up.
very good, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Morning, morena to all of you. Look, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I couldn't do so at the last meeting because of process. It was related to the Cranford Street bus lane item, which was the issue I want to refer to this morning. I was a part of that decision-making process, so couldn't speak at the last meeting at which that was being considered. It's really concerning, I think, that some elected members appear to be not listening to the public in consultation processes when it comes to the final decision making. And they, some of them anyway, justify their actions by saying things like it's not a vote, or their arguments didn't stack up, or it's not an overwhelming majority. Now, at the risk of sounding like our Prime Minister, all I want to say to you today is please think very carefully before you go against the majority of voices and submissions and consultations, especially where those submissions are not the result of an orchestrated pro forma group-driven campaign, which we see sometimes as well. Meeting and talking with people around the Innes ward, as I have been and more widely across the city, people are becoming increasingly disillusioned when decisions like Cranford Street go against the majority of submissions, especially when the recommendation is backed by expert advice and information and is not what staff recommended. One man I spoke with last weekend told me he doesn't submit to consultations anymore because, he said, the council won't listen anyway. And I always say that's not true, but that's increasingly difficult to say. A letter to the press this week about the Cranford Street bus lane decision sums it up perfectly, if I can just read that. Dear Editor, I can now understand why people don't waste their time putting in submissions on projects like the Cranford Street bus lane, as the minority seems to win. Here's an idea, the letter writer writes. Why don't we try this with the local body elections next year and the person with the least votes gets in? Thanks, Steve, and hoon hey. It could be me, you're right, Andre. Touché. The resident satisfaction surveys, where levels of public trust and council reputation are recorded, regularly return levels that, to be frank, are embarrassing. In the 23-24 period, only 26% of people surveyed felt they had an influence on decision making. Of course, councillors, board members, we have information that the public may not. There are briefings, workshops, piles of reports and other documents that we read. But people aren't stupid, and they can see the way that the blinkers go on elected members at decision time, whether it's because of political ideology or for some other reason. We have to listen to our communities, just as thankfully was the case yesterday in the Wheels to Wing vote, although once again it wasn't exactly unanimous, with the political lines clearly drawn. What we do as elected members is represent people. We are about people. E tangata, e tangata, e tangata. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Right. Next we have Harrison, who will talk to us about the importance of elected members listening to community feedback. You have 5 minutes also. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. So I also am here with regards to the same topic Ellie is. And I think there's a degree with which there has been a bit of miscommunication around the actual scope of the project at hand. And that's not something that's been overly well recounted to the public. And so there's a bit of light that needs to be shone on the decision that was made. So for one, with the downstream effect management plan and Cranford Street as a whole, it's obviously subject to the notice of requirement from the Environment Court. Now that notice of requirement informs the staff recommendation, and that's the only thing that staff can consider in their recommendation, whether or not there are other impacts to be held. So for example, within the Cranford Street recommendation made by staff, our experts here at Council, there was no consideration given to induced demand in that recommendation. There was no consideration made to safety, because the only consideration that could be made in the recommendation was to remove traffic off of surrounding streets and place it on Cranford Street. Now, as a community, that is very important to understand that, and I think I'm going to quote you here, Tyler, is that communities are not thoroughfares. And so, as a resident that lives just off of Cranford Street, I do not appreciate my street being a thoroughfare. And I was quite happy to see that when the vote came through, it was not going to remain that way. And so I think there's a lot to be said around the way in which our community engages with its community board coming from the opposite side is that there are always going to be differing voices in our community. That's why we have 3 elected representatives per ward and not 1, is that we look to cover and aggregate all of the views of our community. And that's why we have a community board that works at a local level, rather than bringing everything straight to councillors for that local approach. And as a committee member for our local residents association, although I'm not speaking on behalf of them today, there were serious discussions made prior to this vote. There were a lot of views held around the table, and there was a lot of backwards and forwards between community organisations, individual stakeholders, and looking at the consultation results. I also note that one of the submitters to the community board on the day the decision made noted that the bus lane option had not received the same treatment in the consultation process and yet still returned 42% of the vote, despite being essentially running with an arm tied behind its back. That there is always the staff recommendation, and that always does stand as a form of expert advice. But each of the elected members of this council and our community boards are all experts in their own community. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sitting around these tables. And so the decision that they make comes with context. And that's the important part, is that advice without context does not necessarily meet the needs of a community. And advice with context is far more palatable and far better for the long-term results of a community than it is elsewhere. So the taking of evidence and of commentary by submitters on the day, looking at the aggregate results, I'm quite happy with the result my board came out with. And I know that some will disagree, and they're entitled to that. We live in a democracy. That's the way things work. But the process was fair, robust. Everyone was given an opportunity to speak. And at the end of the day, our elected members put their heads together. They used all of the talent they have, all of the expertise they have in their communities, and they took the advice and they came out with an option that was going to provide the best long-term safe response for our community. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, Tim.
Thank you very much for your deputation, and well informed, and the explanation's great. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you for balancing that last speaker out, because I think you've restored some mana in us as decision makers, because we were told by Ellie that we have blinkers on, we have our political ideology at the fore, and that we should think carefully before we vote. And I thought that was slightly offensive. So I really appreciate your positive comments and your respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. Good on you. Okay, next we have Jeffrey King, who is here to talk about graffiti and general tidiness of the city. Welcome. You have 5 minutes as well, young man.
I probably won't take that. Good morning. Graffiti. It's absolutely disgusting in the Heathcote and Littleton wards. The gondola, we're now in our 6th week. No, wipe the grin off your face. You're responsible. Gondola now in its 6th week.
Point of order, there's no Littleton ward at Spinks Peninsula.
Pardon?
Just look at me. Yep, carry on. Just keep talking. You're right.
To wonder he hasn't used a 4-letter word. Gondola now in its 6th week from asking for it to be removed. Same design behind the children's playground in Oxford Street in Littleton. The same design on the speed limit sign entering New Brighton and Bridge Street. Similar design halfway down the Sumner side of Evans Pass in the Heathcote ward. The gondola graffiti you can see from Eastgate, clearly, from Linwood, Ferrymead, Opawa, it's that huge. You can even see it from New Brighton. It's been sitting there 6 weeks since I asked for it to be removed, and it's still sitting there. You ring the graffiti staff, you leave a message, they do not return the call. The place is dysfunctional. The graffiti leader and the team leader need to be given the DCM. Don't come Monday, replace them with people who have a bit of pride in the city. You've got security cameras. You should be able to pick up who is doing it. the electrical boxes from Sumner through up and down Colombo, Manchester Street. Disgusting. The next thing I want to talk about is the rubbish in Cuthbert Road. Mattresses, animal cages, Ruru Road, St John Street, the dumping ground with cameras to prosecute the offenders. There are cameras everywhere in the city, and if somebody wants to get off their backside, they can look at the cameras and see who is doing it. And there's a theme to it, and it originates, I think, in Littleton. Maces Road, you need to fix the surface. It's a shambles after, 13 years, nothing has been done since the earthquakes. Ruru Road, no curbing, no footpaths, no vehicle entrances to the businesses. If you meet a bus or a truck which regularly uses it, you have to pull off the grass and pass one another, pull onto the verges. It's not even third world, it's 10th world. It's absolutely disgusting in the second biggest city in New Zealand. And don't start me on New Brighton in the shopping centre, and the person whose ward it is should take more care, and you need to get onto the owners of the property in the middle of the Pages Road in the shopping centre, 2 or 3 metre high lupin bushes. And the Littleton Road tunnel. I don't see why somebody from this council cannot be in contact with Transit New Zealand. Have you driven down? One of you goes every day or twice a day. The weeds are that high. Some are sprayed, some aren't. It's an absolute disgrace. The tunnel is 50 shades of grey. It used to have a yellow roof and white walls. The lights, the grime and dirt on the lights reflecting into the tunnel need a clean up. You may as well not have them. It's a bloody disgrace, and you people here at City Hall should have some sway with Transit New Zealand to get the place cleaned up. Transit New Zealand's a holiday park, as far as I'm concerned, and the same happens from Belfast through to Hornby by the airport. There's more weeds than there are plants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. No, we'll run out of time. Thank you. Thank you. No, that was very well put. Thank you. Right. So now we have deputations. We have Barry Harcourt, who is here to speak about item 12. Thank you, Barry. You have got 10 minutes. Period.
I'll try to take less. Thanks very much for letting me speak here this morning. And thanks very much for the staff providing me with a copy of their report a few days ago. Overall, I think the report is written providing a paucity of in-depth information, and to that extent it needs to be rewritten. I speak as a non-user of e-scooters and as someone affected by them. My experience with them has been primarily a person who has had to get out of their way or have been obstructed by them when walking. On the phone, I have a photo of 4 e-scooters beside each other across the footpath. On several occasions, I've been unsuccessful in getting out of their way. Yes, I've been injured. There's no mention of injuries in the staff report, but I've been lucky that my wife is an ex-nurse and was able to bandage my legs. I walk most days of the week and usually with a dog. On almost every occasion I have found scooters obstructing my way. Until July last year, I thought council would have been in the process of doing something about it. But alas, after talking with many people about it, including some people in Wellington, they were unanimously of the view that nothing will be done unless I lodged a complaint. So from mid-August last year, I kept a tally of the obstructing e-scooters and reported them to council at month end. For the 16 months from there to the end of November, I'd lodged complaints for over 1,150 scooters that were obstructing me. There could have been a hell of a lot more if I'd lodged them before July. I provided the date of the obstruction, the address, and the scooter owner, and where it was. Apart from those scooters that have hit me, not one of the rest have been correctly parked. Are those details provided in monthly reports to you? No? Why not? You, the licensing authority. I presume Christchurch City Council would have provided details of my complaints to the two companies, Lime and Neuron. I don't know what they've done, but it seems to have no effect on the users. I haven't seen anything, no coverage in the news media about their action. The real problem is the users. They haven't changed their behaviour. They just don't care. Is council or the e-scooter companies going to do something about that attitude? No? Well, why are you letting them be used here? So it's appropriate to apply the analogy of a child failing to amend its bad behaviour. A responsible parent removes the toy until the behaviour is changed. Nothing in the report indicates that will be done. The report refers to users of the e-scooters riding along too fast, no helmet. People have gone to emergency department with injuries. Are those details reported to you? Probably not. What about the 2 deaths that we've had in the last 18 months? Quite frankly, I'm inclined to almost to agree with some of the people who were sitting here before. You look at Church Corner and all what was going on there in the last week. Yes, you looked at the number of crashes. Did you look at the number of vehicles going through each day as a percentage of those crashes? It wasn't reported in the news media, but then again, we know what the news media is like. The average distance of a ride on a scooter, 1 kilometre in 6.5 minutes. Heavens above, for the sake of saving 6 minutes. So I ask you, how many deaths and injuries does it take for you councillors to say no, we don't have them? Because the responsibility is with you. The reports refer to public nuisance, inconsiderate parking, etc. How's anything that's done in the report or by the Lime and ARIO going to change the attitude of the users? I doubt it. Before the Olympics, Paris had a referendum and they said no. I know Sydney Council is having reservations about them. The Lord Mayor of Melbourne has banned them just recently. The trouble with Auckland and Wellington, where the Lime and whoever the scooter companies were, they turned around and they had trouble with the numbers. What audits are going by the staff of the council on how many are operating in Christchurch? Recently, there's been quite a lot of news media coverage about the shortage of electricity supply in New Zealand due to the additional use in modern times of data storage, EVs and AI. You can add to that EV motor vehicles. Well, perhaps if we didn't have them, we might not have such a problem, and it's going to get worse. And that also means that perhaps the council needs to get away from EV vehicles. In summary, I think the best place for scooters are somewhere far distant from Christchurch, and my recommendation to the council is not to renew them. But I have an option for you to consider. In the last few years, you've spent what seems to have been hundreds of millions of dollars on cycleways. Why not put them on there and get them off the footpaths so that we pedestrians can have some safety? If you issue new licences, you are exposing pedestrians to potentially significant injuries. Are you going to accept some responsibility for that? Your primary responsibility as councillors is to give us people a safe environment. Currently, you don't. And I think it is about time you took that responsibility in hand. That's all I've got to say. Any questions?
Great. Jake, please, then Tyler.
Thank you. Thanks, Barry. I'm actually really inclined to agree with you with regard to Lime scooters. I think our enforcement has been a little bit lax, and it's hard to know what's really going on when we just leave it to the companies involved. My question, though, pertains to Church Corner. Are you saying that the rate of accidents there is acceptable? You seem to be worried about...
No, what I'm saying is they seem to have taken the number of accidents as a proportion, whereas in the council report, they haven't made an equivalent comparison.
Equivalent proportional comparison. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
But I've talked to a lot of people about this, and a lot of older people are saying, if the council won't listen to us, then we may have to look at the provisions of the Ways and Means Act.
Okay. Good. You all right, Jake? Done?
Yep.
Kia ora, Barry. Thanks for that. Yep. I completely understand your sentiment around feeling unsafe, particularly on shared paths and etc.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, are there any particular hotspots that you could talk about which you feel extremely unsafe or unsettled on?
Yes, I go anywhere between, sometimes it's from the hospital and through Hagley Park, but I would say Riccarton Road, Main South Road, up to what's the petrol station, the road going...
Is that the Z station or the BP? Oh, okay.
No, and coming down Memorial Ave and Fendleton Road to the park.
Gotcha. Yeah, so they don't have speed caps on those in those areas. Okay, that's cool. Thank you so much for that.
And
Okay,
we,
thank you.
yeah, we've gone over a bit, but Tim, you have a question, and that'll be the last one. Thank you.
I guess... Oh, no, look, it's okay.
You sure? You're all good? Thank you. Thank you very much, Barry, for coming in and telling us that. Okay, we have no